we don't expand our imagination.
Justification for being what you
Welcome to Washington Unplugged. I'm Jan Crawford. Well, at the 11th hour, that was right before Arizona's controversial immigration law went into effect, a federal judge stripped away some of its most controversial elements. Earlier, I spoke with Arizona Congresswoman Ann Kirkpatrick, a Democrat, and asked her what the state's next step following Wednesday's ruling will be. Take a look.
You know, here's my question. Is the border any more secure today after the ruling than it was yesterday before the ruling? Absolutely not. I think this is a distraction. We need to secure the border. We can't take our focus off of that important issue. We have people living in those communities who do not feel safe in their homes, and that's just not right.
Well, wait, can I just interrupt you there? When you say
Sure.
This is a distraction, I mean, do you mean the Arizona law was a distraction and was unnecessary, and what the federal government should be doing is trying to push forward with more meaningful and tougher enforcement of the existing laws?
You know, I read Senate Bill 1070. It does nothing to secure the border.
Okay.
And I think there's a consensus that is where we have to start. We've got to know who's coming and going from our country. We've got to keep criminals out. We've got to deport criminals who are here. But that's our focus, and this bill does nothing. The lawsuit is going to continue the legal wrangling for years. In the meantime, taxpayers are funding both sides of that issue, of that battle. Millions of dollars will be spent, and we still won't have a secure border.
Well, now, obviously, the law gave police the authority to ask for someone's, basically their papers if they were pulled over for a lawful stop. Do you think that would have had any difference, made any difference? Would this law have had any impact if it had gone forward, the judge hadn't blocked it?
Yeah, I don't think the law would have had any impact. That's why I was against it, and that's why I called on the administration not to sue the state of Arizona. I mean, it's frustrating and angry and I'm angry that was their response. But what we need is a concerted effort with the administration, with Congress, to secure the border.
But why were you frustrated and angry with the administration when it decided to sue Arizona?
We've been calling on the federal government to fix this problem for years in Arizona. I was in the state legislature when we passed the E-Verify law, and we did that out of anger and frustration that the federal government wasn't doing anything. So I've been calling on Congress to address this issue since I got here. I'm Arizona's only member on Homeland Security, and again saying, let's not be distracted by these sideshows. Here's the issue. There's a consensus that we need to secure the border. Let's dedicate the resources to get the job done.
But Congresswoman, obviously, you know, this is not a new problem unique to this administration. The issue of immigration seems to be one that is almost impossible to find consensus on. Why is this such an impossible, seemingly problem for this Congress, not only this Congress, but in the Bush administration, to solve?
You know, I've been talking to my colleagues. I say, you know, earlier in this session, we helped out the Midwest states, other states that were really suffering in this economic downturn. And I'm saying, now come to help Arizona. Come now to the table and help the border states solve this problem. We can all work together on this.
And now how would you, I mean, when you talk about, like, come to Arizona, how would you characterize the problem in Arizona? Let's say I'm sitting, you know, in Tennessee, or, you know, what is the problem that Arizona is now facing?
The problem is that Arizona has a border with Mexico, and we have these powerful drug cartels in Mexico that are smuggling cash, illegal drugs, people, guns across that border, both northbound and southbound. And, you know, I tell them stories about the ranchers that I talk to yeah, you know, they don't feel safe in their homes. They don't feel like they can leave their families just to go out and mend their fences or tend to their cattle. Because these are hardened criminals coming across the border. And then, you know, we've got pictures of them. You know, I think that really has an impact.
Do you think when the Obama administration, I mean, obviously in response to that, and the judge recognized some of that in her ruling yesterday on Arizona's understandable frustration with crime and the problems that it has at the border. But I mean, when the Obama administration decided to sue to block this law, why do you think they did that? Is that just making this issue even more political?
You know, I can't guess on the motives of the administration. As I said, is the border any more secure today than it was yesterday as a result of the lawsuit and the judge's ruling? Absolutely not.
Well, so then where are we today? Is it just more politicized? You know, other states are looking at passing similar laws. This is obviously one judge. Like you said, this is going to be appealed. The litigation is going to continue for years. What's really changed?
You know, nothing has changed. I will tell you, I'm heartened by the fact that the House of Representatives yesterday, in a bipartisan vote, voted to give resources to the border so we can secure it. And I think that's a step in the right direction. And like I say, that was on a voice vote. There was a consensus that this is what we need to do. And so I'm calling on people to keep that focus. Let's not be distracted by the lawsuit, by the judge's ruling. We've got to keep focused on the border.
But what about Democrats who, you know, obviously want to provide, you know, a pretty clear path to citizenship for some people who have been in this country illegally, and Republicans are saying that's a non-starter? I mean, where do you see this reaching some kind of turning point where people can sit down and figure this out?
You know, Jan, I think it starts again with making those communities and those people who live along the border feel safe in their communities. We've got to focus on that first. I think once that's done, we can talk about the other immigration issues.
Okay, well, if you don't mind, also, let me just ask you another question on a totally different topic. Rangel, who obviously has his hearings today, what is your take on that, and do you think that he should step down?
I've called on him to resign his seat. I think as members of Congress, we have a duty to hold each other to a higher standard. I'm not happy with what's been discovered by the Ethics Committee. I think he should step down.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Congresswoman, for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Jan.
And joining me now for a roundtable is CBSNews.com's Brian Montopoli and Jonathan Benner, who's a senior litigator at Reed Smith LLP. Let me start with you, Brian, off the Rangel developments. We've got some conflicting reports that the congressman may have struck a deal, may not have struck a deal. Is this what Democrats really want? Just this to go away with the midterm elections now kind of looming on the horizon in November?
Yeah, the Democrats do not want to see a trial here. I mean, it's, you know, everyone remembers what happened with Jim Traficant when he was expelled from Congress. It was an embarrassing situation. And, you know, Pelosi vowed to clean up Congress when she came in. And, you know, vulnerable Democrats do not want to see Republicans running ads holding Charlie Rangel up as the face of the Democratic Party. I mean, the guy is part of the leadership, and saying, oh, you know, Democrats said they were going to clean things up. Well, you know, look at what we have here. We have this long trial. So this situation is bad, and they want it to go away. You know, from Rangel's perspective, however, he probably wants a deal, but he also wants to protect his legacy. I mean, this guy's 80 years old. He's something of a giant in the chamber, and he's only going to agree to a deal that is going to allow him to save face. And so the wrangling that's been going on is about, you know, sort of how that deal would look.
Right, and whether that's possible or not. Well, let's talk about the ruling yesterday. Another obviously political hot potato, very difficult, I think, for Republicans and Democrats as the elections come forward. Now, I was talking with Sources Administration yesterday, and they really saw this ruling as not only a big legal victory, Mr. Benner, but a political one. I mean, what's your sense of this ruling? Was it a slam dunk for the administration?
It was a very strong ruling in favor of the administration. The politics of it are less clear to me. I'm a lawyer who does these kinds of cases from time to time, but I think it's indisputable that the administration was vindicated in its position that this is a strongly federal area, and it's one of those areas that just doesn't accommodate a lot of interplay between state, local, and federal authorities.
That's right, because this is a thing, obviously this issue has been just such a hot button controversial issue. People see it as a question of fairness, but the ruling was actually turning on specific kind of complex issues about the federal government's role versus the state's role. How do you think this will play out on appeal? I mean, do you think this judge is on pretty solid ground with this ruling?
It seemed like a very workmanlike decision.
Workmanlike.
The judge marched through the various elements of the Arizona law that the United States had challenged, and one by one she looked at them through the prism of the standards that have been around for a long time in these areas, and I think she did a very thorough job. appellate courts don't generally like to overrule trial judges when trial judges are trying to sort out the conduct of litigation in their courtroom. So right there, I think she has a good decision going into an appellate context. But then again, the wild card in this is the heat around this case.
Right.
So anything can happen. And,
but it's going to take a long time,
well,
because this was just the kind of, they're blocking the law. Now they've got to decide whether the next step is whether it's unconstitutional. So
indeed, and I think people who are watching this should keep in mind that this is the preliminary injunction aspect of it, and both the parties involved and people with interest watching from outside have to keep in mind that this issue only is whether this law should be enjoined while they get to the meat of it. The meat of it is the constitutionality of the statute.
Well, now, Brian, obviously, as Mr. Benner says, this is a huge legal win for the White House. I mean, I think it was a political win, too. The administration got so much heat for dragging Arizona into court. Now they've been vindicated by this federal judge. But do you think there's also some gain here for Governor Brewer out there in Arizona?
Absolutely. I mean, if you're Governor Brewer, this is a woman who, you know, before this immigration issue, which she actually came to late. I mean, she's the face of this now, but she wasn't really an outspoken proponent of this measure until she signed the bill, and it wasn't even clear she was going to sign it, if you remember. Once she signs the bill, once she becomes the face of this, you know, Brewer suddenly, she goes from trailing in her re-election campaign against the Democratic candidate to a strong lead. She's being talked, you know, who is she going to endorse? I mean, this has been great for her, this issue, frankly, and you know, now she's had the judge allowed the law to go into effect, I think you'd have started to see news stories about perhaps some of the negative consequences of this law, right? People being detained, you know, legal citizens being detained. It's just a lot of the sort of potential ugliness that really could have come out. The fact that the law didn't go into effect, I think, really helps Brewer. She can continue to talk about this issue while at the same time not having to worry about necessarily the ramifications of the law. Now, quickly on the politics, I think that the White House views this issue in the long run as a good issue for them. I mean, Democrats want, you know, Hispanic or Latino voters on their side, and they think we need to be on the right side of this issue. For Republicans, I think they see short-term gain here. On the long term, though, I think Republicans are worried that by being seen as so sort of strongly opposed to this immigration from Mexico and their position on comprehensive immigration reform, they're going to alienate a whole important voting bloc, much like they frankly alienated African Americans.
Right, and obviously Hispanics is this emerging, potentially powerful and decisive voting bloc in the long run. But I think what's so interesting about this ruling is that, as we were saying, it's this incredibly contentious issue. But when you look at what the judge writes, it's almost boilerplate kind of law. I mean, there's not a lot of heat in her ruling. What was the most surprising thing about that ruling when you took a look at it yesterday? I know you've read it more than once. Well,
I was surprised at how unsurprising it was. To me, it was a
Wait, you were surprised at how unsurprising?
Exactly.
Yeah.
It was a garden variety preemption exercise.
And of course, preemption meaning that
the federal government, while it has limited powers, where it has those powers, and they're enumerated in the Constitution, those powers are plenary. And I
so
think
only the feds get to do it.
Only the feds get to do it, and if the states start doing certain things, this is not many things, but immigration and naturalization and foreign affairs, which are all bound up here, are among the things that only the federal government can do and has to take responsibility for it. Now, these cases don't come out of thin air. They usually arise where there's either a perception or reality or both that the federal government has dropped the ball. That's why you have these cases. And then local political actors step into the vacuum. And that's clearly what's happened here, and the judge recognized it.
All right. And now I guess the pressure's on the federal government to pick up the ball and see if they can fix it. Thank you very much, Mr. Benner, for being here. Brian, thanks for joining us today and your insights.
Thanks.
And thank you all for watching Washington Unplugged. Join us again tomorrow right here on CBSNews.com. I'm Jan Crawford. Have a great day.